And I say, hello, Satan, I believe it is time to go. Me and the devil walking side by side. Me and the devil walking side by side. And I'm gonna
Greetings, ladies and lads, and a happy Halloween to you.
satisfy.
I'm not the superstitious type, but let me tell ya, something does happen every Halloween, compelling me to paint what I think might just consistently be my personal best model of the year. And the spirit that possesses me this time is no one else than Lady Olynder, Mortarch of Grief, Marshal of Doomed Souls, and the most terrifying bedsheet in the land. Today, we're going to divert from Heavy Metal's clean and pristine depiction of the Nighthaunt Duchess, and instead, paint her in a truly grim and gory fashion, using a lot of gradients and earthy tones, as well as so much blood that it might even get a rise out of the two vampire lords from the last years. But before we do all that, we first need to build the model, a process that's as straightforward as it is time intensive. See, the big sheet making up her body is made up of two parts, leaving gaps on either side, which are quite nasty and immersion breaking. To close them up, we take the back of our hobby knife and scrape over the length of the gap until the plastic flakes essentially weld the plates together. The rest of the building process is just more of the typical addition of small parts and other details. You can really see how well thought out this mini is, as she stands upright even without any glue or other expedients. Say what you want about GW, their models are expertly designed. Well, now that Lady O is fully assembled, she only needs to be primed. You'd think that we'd take a brilliant white or maybe a light grey here, but no. I opted for a sandy prime, as I just feel that it helps ground the miniature right away, and that it lets me properly build up the white on her dress and veil more naturally. Starting with what I believe to always be the most annoying part, we take a dark greyish blue and start painting the inside of her dress. Once the tightest parts are painted, we switch to a medium grey and start blending together our first gradient. We finish the inside with a very light grey toward the bottom, though that won't stay for long as our entire plan for this model sees the dress dragged through mud and gore. Taking a mustard yellow, we start another dirty looking gradient on the outside, raising the paint from the bottom to roughly the halfway point of what remains of her dress. After that, we take a light, pale beige and bring it down from her corset, leaving a bit of primer as an exposed barrier between the two. While the paints are still wet, we swiftly blend them together. I'm actually pushing the entire gradient further down here as I'm blending it in, because I forgot to leave some space for the off-white part of her dress. Her clothes basically get dirtier the further down they are, with her veil later being the only pristine part that's still bright white. Speaking of her veil, we again start with the underside first, as we painted the very same way we painted the inside of her dress. With the light grey still on our brush, we make a multi-dimensional 180, painting now the upper side of her veil. We keep painting on brighter and brighter whites as we move further up, blending the still wet colors together as we go. As you can see, the brighter the white, the worse the opacity, at least with Citadel's colors. This just means that we need to apply multiple coats to achieve full coverage, which is fairly time consuming, but in my mind, still leaves a better result than painting over a white primer to begin with. The government doesn't want you to know, but Lady Olynder actually has luscious strands of hair flowing in waves down her shoulders. The fact that we painted in a dark brown turning into a pale brown toward the end of her strands stays just between you and me, alright? To be fair though, maybe they want to keep it a secret just because of how difficult it is to navigate your brush through the holes in her veil when we're trying to reach the last unpainted spots. As I gave the white spots their last coats, I pondered the color that I wanted to give her corset, in the end settling for a dark burgundy, because just as with her hair, you have a very hard time noticing it when it's all painted the same. Next up are the rose vines that wrap around her form. I want them to be a little bit dead looking, to, fit the theme here, so we start by painting them in a dark olive green. Once that's dry, we take a brighter, more vibrant green, and roughly highlight all the areas that could hit with some light from my table lamp. After that, we take a dark green to reinforce the shadowy areas. To up the contrast, we take a very bright, almost neon poison green, and pick out some of the most illuminated details. The roses follow a similar fashion, as we give them a toned down light burgundy for a base coat, and pick out the petals of every flower with a freakishly light pink. The Staff of Midnight is an instrument of pure evil. So mighty that GW even specifically raises your attention to it on the back of the box, which is kinda cute actually. And because I'm not a huge fan of true metallic metal details on mostly non-metallically painted miniatures, we pick an emerald green to paint it with. For Olynder's skin, we mix up something that I can only describe as a ghostly blue, made up of light blue, light grey, and pure white. The next step is kinda funny, because I just moaned about it. We pick the brightest true metallic gold that we have, and paint the amazingly detailed headdress she is wearing. Her corset, as well as the upper part of her dress, are beset with fine interlacing flourishes. For the first one, I chose to pick them out in white. This is already difficult to show with just the camera between me and the model, but with her also being so wobbly, it's an utter impossibility. So have fun with this profile shot of me. Even from way back here you can see just how wiggly it is.
What are you looking at, motherfucker?
For the details on her dress, which we pick out in a dark brown, I chose to move the camera as well. Look at this cool official Brink of Art bathrobe that my elder brother gave to me. Whoa! Brink of Art? More like a bath of art. Olynder herself is now fully painted as far as base colors go, so next up I had two accompanying ghosts. Because I'm very much fed up with all the wobbliness of this miniature, I had the amazing idea to just take some rolled up paper and stuff it under her dress. This makes the mini have more contact points to the base, leading to a lot less wobbling. To make sure that the two sidekicks don't attempt to steal the show, I went for a much darker approach. The lower part of their robes gets painted in earthy colors, to show that they too drag them through the dirt on the regular. Then we take a light greyish blue for the upper part of their robes, similarly to what you see in heavy metals paint jobs. Lastly, the creases of their uppermost folds get pronounced with a light grey, leaving us with a lovely gradient that doesn't take attention away from Olynder's radiance. We finish up with what counts as their body, with a dark blue for the inside of their clothes, before switching to a brownish red for their manes. Here we leave the ends of their strands alone for just a little longer, because of course they too deserve a gradient of colors, with a dark burgundy to finish them up. When it comes to their arms and skulls, we pretty much take the same ghostly blue that we used for Lady Olynder. The only things that are left for us to do now are the small chest, which we pick out in a dark brown, and the hourglass, which its frame we paint in the bright gold from earlier. While we have it out already, we also pick out the ornamental flourishes on the chest, before switching to a medium grey for the hourglass's glass itself. The entire conglomerate of minis is now fully painted, but as nice as they may look already, we are lacking some depth here, so get out the dark wash and quickly cover them with it. I don't apply it as heavy-handedly as I do so often. After all, we did just spend a whole load of time establishing gradients and contrast already. Preventing tide marks from building up is crucial with large surfaces like this, so we need to keep our brush strokes swift. Now, I am really hesitant to call this entire undertaking a speed paint, because although I think we've worked quite effectively, it still took quite a bit of time and effort to get to this point. That being said, I do want to make clear that this has less to do with the painting techniques that we used, and more to do with the miniature being so difficult to handle and paint around. Don't be discouraged from taking inspiration from this video for yourself, and just remember to maybe fill out a form with paper earlier on in your process, to save yourself a lot of headache. As Lady Olynder hovers in front of us now, we could definitely call it a wrap at this point, and still impress any players on the tabletop. However, I do recommend you keep watching, for I have a handful of quick and easy addendums still up my sleeve to take this miniature to the next level. Inspecting the wash's result, there are quite a bit of dirty remains on her dress now, as well as some tide marks on her veil despite our best efforts to prevent this. Focusing on the dress for now, these imperfections won't stick out for much longer, as we start to intentionally stain the fabric with a vivid burgundy. If you think this amount of blood is excessive, you clearly haven't read any of the Age of Sigmar books. That shit oftentimes goes crazier than 40k. We work in the other colors of our blood and mud-soaked gradient with a really beaten up brush and some aggressive stippling. This way we get a very satisfying random pattern, as well as a great texture. I quickly realized that the colors didn't end up as dark as I wanted them to be, so I made a harsh course correction with a dark brown, even mixing it with a pure black later on. As you might have noticed, something like this is not clear cut, and will have us going back and forth a little bit until we are satisfied with the result. I even pulled out the pale beige from earlier again to break up the line of blood on her dress. How about we finish it up with some blood splatters? Blood for the Blood God is an excellent paint, but way too viscous to try and fling it from a brush, so we need to just lightly dunk our brush into the pot and slowly stipple it on. I say slowly because a fun effect like this is easily overdone, but in our case, I think we just hit the sweet spot. That was a lot of fun, but don't stop now. There is still more we can do for our Duchess, especially when it comes to contrast. Picking up the purest white from our arsenal, we pronounce just the upper folds of her dress, and of course, reinforce the white of her veil. We want her to look like an allegory for any undead empire, with a bit of former grace and glory shining through the death and despair that is now their reality. Apart from the folds, we also pick out the upward edges of the holes in the cloth, further intensifying the contrast and radiance of the model. I also want to let you guys know that I took some light grey to clean up these ugly tide marks. It's of course nothing that I planned on doing, but I just want to stay transparent with you. As we have it out already, we pick up a fine brush to pronounce the upper folds of the robes of Olynder's stooges. Just enough so they get a little more contrast, but not too much, as we want them to not outshine the Duchess herself. For the highlights on their ghostly skin, we can simply take the same color that we use as our base, as the wash dulled the first coat down for us. Highlighting the Staff of Midnight, which still sounds like a MacGuffin from fucking like teenage vampire drama or something, was a rather interesting task, as I didn't want to lose too much of our rich emerald base color. Apart from the details, I only highlighted two sides of the round staff, trying to pay attention to the angles where most people would see her from. The gemstone set into the head of the staff is supposed to be a highlight for the keen-eyed onlooker, so it will require a lot of attention and finicky detail work to look right. No way, Jose, I'll be able to catch that on camera and get a good result for either you watching or the gemstone. Details like this also just have to be painted with the model still disassembled. There's just no way the guys from Heavy Metal get such a good result otherwise. Anyway, this is how it looked after I gave it a try. Not too bad, especially the side that I tackled second, but also another humbling experience for me on my way to refine my painting skills. Time for us to wrap it up. Taking the brightest true metallic silver that we can muster, we pick out some highlighted spots on all the golden ornaments. Not only does this help to make them sparkle more, it also cools down the temperature of the mini, if you know what I mean by that. The almost white true metallic metal lets it look a lot more lifeless and cold, which is exactly what we want, and exactly what I would advise any general of Undev to do with their minis. The hourglass tells us that our time with this model comes to an end, as we highlight its glass with ever brighter tones of grey, finishing this sweet miniature with a few dots of bright white. I think Nighthaunt are amongst the most underrated armies in Age of Sigmar, just because of how simple GW paints them and how limited the customization options are with the way they are sculpted. Don't get me wrong, there are people who really make the most of them, like the artists behind the miniatures that you see on screen right now. And hopefully, this video inspired you to think a little more outside the box with your haunted blankets as well. I don't understand how, of all holidays, Halloween is the one that brings out the best in me when it comes to miniature painting. By the way, I got this miniature from Theinrich, who actually has 3 more Lady Olinders in his pile of shame. How it came to be that he became the biggest simp for a floating bedsheet is a story for him to tell though. As always, I have all the paints that I use for this paint job down in the description of the video. And should you have any questions, maybe a couple of suggestions, be my guest and share them in the comment section. If you're wondering about the base, I just painted it plain black, because the few routes that GW gave me to customize it just felt really fucking boring, especially after working on Raduka and Laukavai, 2 other amazing Halloween videos that I highly recommend you watch after this one. I definitely do want to revisit the base at another point in time, but the video is long enough as it is, so I think I'll bow and take my leave now. I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and if you did, please feel free to tag along as I make the button light up by saying subscribe. Until next time, take care and have a happy Halloween.